Whatever Happened to Janie, Chapter 3. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson could not make a long drive on the interstate fighting traffic, paying tolls, remembering street directions, not when the journey would end the family. So one of the lawyers was taking Janie. Reeve leaned against the dining room wall, staring out the window, waiting for the lawyer's car to arrive and his mother's permission to go outside and say goodbye. His mother had refused to let him interrupt the Johnsons this morning. Reeve had spent half his life interrupting the Johnsons and was 100% sure of his welcome. He obeyed his mother, but not without 1,000 arguments. Reeve had not slept very well, but he was pretty sure he had slept better than any of the Johnsons. He loved Janie. Technically, she loved him too, but she was divorced from the world right now, and that included Reeve. He had always thought of her as a dizzy redhead, but the word dizzy had been a compliment. He thought of Janie as light and airy, like hope and joy. Now dizzy meant stumbling and scared, her head swimming with fear. He thought the promises made by Janie and her parents were wrong, and he thought the Springs were wrong to have asked for them. The promises of silence was terrible. How could Janie not telephone home, not write, not visit? But the Springs wanted their daughter. It was still weird to realize that Janie was somebody else's daughter. To go cold turkey, like giving up cigarettes or booze. Except Janie had to give up her family, as if Mr. and Mrs. Johnson had nothing but an addiction, and 3 months off would take care of any foolish lingering love. It's not as bad as you're making it sound, said Mrs. Shields. She had baked for the occasion. This was how she faced change. She baked for funerals and weddings. She baked for newcomers to the block and friends retiring to Florida. Reeve often wondered about women, but he wondered about his mother most. Why, when Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were saying their goodbye to their only child, had his mother made them a chicken, linguine, and olive casserole? Why, when Janie was turning into Jenny, had his mother made her 4 dozen double chocolate chip cookies? Is it so as bad? Said Reeve. His breath had fogged up the window. He rubbed it off with his sweater sleeve. If I were the Springs, said his mother, which thank God I'm not. Can you imagine wondering where your daughter was for 12 years? I mean, I was crazy when Lizzie disappeared for one night. Do you remember that one terrible night? And Lizzie was 18, and I still called the police, but Reeve's mother rarely got to the point. He felt himself losing patience with her and forced himself to stay motionless. He was supposed to carry the casserole over to the Johnsons because his mother felt awkward about it. How does she think I feel? Thought Reeve. It's really the only way to put something behind you. You have to focus on the new, not the old. So I think it probably is the right way for Janie to make adjustments. Reeve did not want to be an adjustment that Janie had to be put behind her. He wanted to be her boyfriend. It was his senior year. He had actually given some thought to senior events like prom and graduation dinner. What were the Springs like? Would they have a sense of humor? Could he call them up and ask if Janie could have a weekend prison pass for senior prom? No, he could not call them up. His marching orders, like Janie's, were no communication. He thought it would be easier for Janie than for him. She was a little frozen, as if a blizzard of worry had iced her funny laugh and thick and soft skin, an adorable smile, and oh well. Reeve blinked away his fantasies of the rest of her. He had not gotten the rest of her. All plans go astray when somebody turns out to be a kidnapped victim. A long, low American 4-door black paint job. Shaded windows pulled up to the Johnsons' driveway. Janie might as well have been leaving in a hearse. I should have made her something, thought Reeve. She doesn't have anything of me to take with her. When I'm finally allowed to call, will I have to call her Jenny? Thought Reeve. He was suddenly not eager to go outside. He did not want to go through this either. Hold the casserole carefully, instructed his mother. Tell Janie she'll want to share the cookies with her new family. Now, don't drop anything. Latch the door so the wind doesn't get in the house. Sometimes Reeve couldn't stand women. They were so practical. How could his mother think of drafts and utility bills at this time? He turned to tell her once and for all that he was not going to say goodbye to Janie with the chicken casserole in one hand. His mother was weeping. It was like a yawn. He caught it. His own tears fell. Oh, God, thought Reeve, not a chicken casserole and tears. Come with me, Mom, he said. He realized as soon as he had said it he needed her, not to carry her dumb casserole, but to carry some of the terror of this. A mother and father were burying their lives. A girl Reeve loved was driving off into the horizon to God knew what. Reeve and Mrs. Shields went out of the house and over to the car. Janie and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson came out at the same moment. Reeve was so pleased to see that the Johnsons looked good. They must have made a monumental effort for Janie. Mrs. Johnson looked lovely in her scarlet suit with her gold earrings and chains, her hair nicely curled. Mr. Johnson had shaved for the first time in days and was in a good pair of cords and a new sweater with a crisp shirt collar sticking up. Janie was wearing a heavy coat, hiding her choice of clothing. Janie and Sarah Charlotte had spent many hours in Janie's closet discussing what you should wear to greet the springs. What do you think, Reeve? Janie had asked at last. Clothes, Reeve had recommended. Janie looked beautiful. The chaotic mess of red curls was partially tamed by a hairband. One of the things Reeve had to admit he loved about Janie was that he was so big next to her. Reeve had but one goal in most of his life, to top 6 feet. Having made that, he yearned for muscles. Having acquired those, he had a last willing to consider studying. He was not going to get into the best college in the world, but he looked great. You look great, whispered Janie. She had done a lot of whispering lately, he thought. The Springs would be the next people to hear her laugh. He hoped she would be able to laugh. He hoped she would be all right. He hoped she would remember him and not adjust him away. He hugged her, very unsatisfying. It was a neighborly hug, when what Reeve wanted was, well, forget it. He wasn't getting that. Everybody said goodbye. Everybody was calm. The lawyer shook hands all around. The lawyer opened the passenger door for Janie. Janie looked at the seat as if most people who sat there got electrocuted. Mommy, said Janie. Her mother seized her, hugging ferociously. They both kept from crying. Mrs. Johnson drew a shaky breath and said one word, stumbling slowly after another. Be our good girl. Make us proud. Show them we were good parents to you. Just drive away, thought Reeve. This is enough. Get going. Janie hugged her father one last time. Her father said nothing, just kissed his beloved daughter. A single tear came down his cheek, taking its time, finding every wrinkle and crack. Janie got in. The lawyer started the engine and reversed out of the driveway. If Janie waved, you could not see through the dark glass. The lawyer shifted into drive and accelerated down the road, away to New Jersey. Mrs. Johnson started to fall. Her husband and Reeve caught her. Don't let Janie see, she whispered. The black car disappeared. Janie had not seen. You'll love this casserole, said Mrs. Shields. Come on, it's January and we're standing around out here. Let's go in. She herded the Johnsons into their house. Reeve stood in the driveway a long time. After a while, he noticed that he had never given Janie the double chocolate chip cookies. 3 months of silence, he thought. It's good I have the cookies. I'm going to need chocolate to last that long.